Hello, readers. Lauren Schultz, author of the Last Consort series, and I'm here to start reading the second book of the series. That is The Last Consort Adaptation. That's again the second book, so we'll go ahead and start reading today. So thanks so much for being here, and sit back and hope you're drinking something delicious, and stand by, and here we go. Okay, here we go. Prologue. Piper is dead. He's the one who killed him. Strange. He couldn't remember a thing. Eric had no recollection of his pulling the trigger after squeezing life from the throat of the jockey-sized man with a reverberating voice that irritated anyone and everyone who ever talked to him. Why couldn't he remember? The darkness of his memory surrounded him in the presence of James Evans and his company of crooks as the day slowly died. A pulsing pain on the top of his head slowly commanded notice, forcing his eyes to heavy. Why couldn't he remember? Why was taking someone's life still foreign, still, when those surrounding him spoke with biting conviction? Evans commanded the room with his very essence. Would he seek vengeance? You're making things difficult for me, Eric. What am I supposed to do with you? Asked Evans. I don't know, sir, he answered. His head pulsed with his words. The darkness ensued, the pulsations sickened. He couldn't escape from the confusion of lack of control and the unforgiving irony of not recalling the ultimate wrong. Albert says you don't remember a thing. He looked directly at Evans. The last thing he recalled was Piper's pink swine-like face hovering right above him and a piercing pain in his back. Then his own unrecognized pleads. Then there was nothing, as if a burst of darkened energy caused his world to suddenly cease to exist. No, I don't. What the hell? Said Albert. I watched him. I was right there. You don't believe this shit, do you? Evans silenced Albert's ranting with the commanding wave of his hand and removed a gun from the bowel of the desk, sliding it across the top of the surface towards Eric. In your madness, you displayed a necessary talent, Evans began. Do you see that painting of the hawk behind me? Shoot the bastard in the head, then his right foot. Evans leaned back in his chair with a sickening air of confidence. Shoot anyone in this room instead, Eric, and Albert will counter with a bullet to the back of your head. Evans, pleaded Alan, the lesser statute partner to Albert. He looked like a character actor who could only be casted as a doting, loudmouthed woman's sappy puppy husband touted around like a puppy in a handbag, with sirens around me. Shut up, Alan, commanded Evans, unmoved, ready, waiting for his point to be taken. He loved it when he made a point. Eric felt every eye in the room, watching each for different reasons as he raised the gun. The 16-year-old lifted the weapon, its weight against the cool of his skin. He focused on the image of the majestic bird, its eyes dissecting its anticipated prey. Brethren. Then he fired, rearing back a bit from the echoing sound of the power from the chamber and again into the correct foot as demanded. Evans leaned back and observed the target, still commanding the astute chocolate-colored leather chair he had refused to leave. Give me the gun. Looks like we overlooked what you can actually do, Eric. The silence didn't drown the sounds of his heartbeat squeezing against his throat. He had killed a man and couldn't remember. Was it better that way? Perhaps Piper couldn't haunt him during the lucid hours. Evans stared into his soul, his eyes staring into a place he never knew was there, awakening a hidden demon, silenced, suppressed. How did he know? Albert, you're with Eric. We found Piper's replacement, but he can't fire with fear. Evans, you've got to be kidding me. You're putting this freak in Piper's spot? He probably should have been there in the first place. I saw what you saw. Yeah, but Al, teach him. Eric goes with you next week to San Diego. Alan glared at Eric, a long pull of sheer hatred echoed by Albert. He continued his expression until they both forced themselves from the office, the anger lingering heavily. There was no feeling of relief with their departure, just a dreadful doubt carried for years. And I have flies on my... Part 1. Your secret is your prisoner. Once you reveal it, you become its slave. Chapter 1. The dark case had been sitting on James Evans' desk for a few hours before anyone approached it. An unanticipated delivery from an anonymous giver didn't seem romantic in any sense. Evans was planning on opening it when support surrounded him, in case it was filled with bees. Rabid, toxic, Africanized ones. What's with the gift? Mitch asked. Gift? Haven't even peeked, James said. You've got a problem then. Evans took a look at the desk, the box sitting near the edge, close enough to teeter from his place, fall into the trash can near his desk, as if he were just an office manager and not a man with more secrets and handshakes made with the wrong folks instead of the board. Did you get Dominic's message, James? Asked Alan. He wants to hear if you accept his offer. Yes, I got his message, but something tells me it wasn't complete, he said, staring at the box. You still haven't opened it yet? Asked Alan. Doesn't feel right. Alan shrugged his shoulders and headed toward the desk. I'll do it for you. Otherwise, I'll keep staring at it until it gets up and sprouts legs. Hell, if it's a bomb, we would have all been dead anyway, you think? Alan pulled the top from the box, peered inside, and grimaced. What the hell is this? He lifted a heavy plastic bag, a pink fleshy bit resting in a pool of deep red blood at the bottom. Is this a fucking tongue? Please say it isn't human, Mitch spoke. It's too big to be human, Mitch. Probably a bull or a horse, but it's still a damn tongue. You need better friends, James. Whatever happened to chocolate? Asked Mitch. James lifted a handwritten note from the box, untouched by the contents. It was a note from Dominic. He had always been dramatic about his delivery. This was no detour from the usual. His offer was clear. The variant Diablo James Evans had access to for a generous cut. But he was going to rescind his offer if not approached soon. He didn't have all day. So what are you going to do, James? Dominic pays well. You can put this all behind you. Maybe focus on your son and Pamela. Leave this alone. Rochelle had access to Eric. Selling what he had would end any prospect of ever giving Vixen time to come to play. After all, he was right there at the turning point. You can leave anytime, Mitch. You've run a good race. Mitch had been there through the thick and thin of the journey. Time was beginning to wear negatively against him. Evans could tell. Just recently, new additions were not sitting well with Mitch, or even Alan and Albert had long been gone from the conversation, even before he decided to run off and be killed. It's not that, James. It's just that it's been years. Eric isn't going to give it to you, Vixen. Why would he? All this time and you think he even still has it? You're running out of resources. Maybe Dominic has perfect timing. I put a shitload of cat litter over that tongue in case it opens up and stinks up the alley back there, said Alan after he returned to the office. Man, what are you doing with a bunch of cat litter? Mitch asked. He wasn't failing at what he had been planning and delaying because of one failed attempt of a team member, a rebellious, unanticipated mistake. Give me a minute. If I don't have what I need in the next 30 days, then Dominic will have a deal. Maybe. Come on, James, this is foolish. You really think Eric is going to give that to you? Not to me, to someone else. Chapter break. A piercing scream echoed in the background, a sound of suffering causing a reaction in the face and in the lower stomach region right in the middle. Garrett pulled the phone from against his face and quickly returned to his call. He watched his friend from against his car, the heat of the desert sun tickling the top of his head, the rays of heat and aura dancing in rhythmic beats against the dark asphalt. Screams belonging to someone died to a pathetic whimper in the background. He watched as William cowered his tall frame near the showcase in the jewelry store just ahead of him. What the hell are you doing to that guy? He asked. Nothing. Just breaking him in, giving him a peel. Literally? Some people need more discipline than others. I guess it sounds painful. He stared ahead. It was just a finger. William had vanished from his sight, the wide showcase window showing nothing more than a white countertop and the cursive white writing of the store's name elegantly aligned in the center of the pane. Garrett didn't want to set foot in the shop after having a foul encounter with the woman that ran the place. He was better leaning against his vehicle in the warm sun, talking to a person of growing suspicion, as he tracked another man who had no idea that a plot had formulated against him right in his own face. He was supposed to know only what friendship ushered, not a few mysterious tidbits that made Garrett wonder why he had been doing what he had been doing in the first place, or who the person really was leaning over a glass case in a jewelry store on a Thursday afternoon Garrett sat waiting for. She wants to see you, wants an update. That old bat can't ever just tell me to my face. It feels like it's always got to go through you now, Garrett puffed. What are you, jealous? Garrett exhaled as William appeared again, this time in the doorway to the store, then beginning toward him. He was always the guy flirty women smiled hard at, twirling the edges of their hair or leaning forward to show off the top of their breasts, likely pulled way up by some sort of miracle bra when they spoke. He found it funny how William never reacted. It was annoying as hell. Garrett guessed it was just that damn dark gash on his face that enticed an impression of mystery, a darkness that drew them into him. But William loved Patricia more than anything in the world. Garrett could see that. I'm running into Smith's to take a leak. Did you want a coffee? William asked from a distance. Yeah, thanks. A vanilla latte with soy. Soy? The voice on the other line asked with a mocking laugh. Doesn't that give you man tits? I wasn't asking you. I'll reach out to Her Majesty and call you back. It had been a headache the last few months. Months of barbecues and baseball games, a few good laughs that always ended with an unspoken bit of mistrust. William didn't trust anyone, not even himself, which made it all so much more difficult to befriend him, be invited to his home, come to know him. It was Patricia who welcomed him with open arms. Perhaps she held on to that desire for a normal existence. He knew something remained caged there, hidden in an obvious refusal on William's part, forgiven by Patricia, a whole missing part he would never be made privy to. The same refusal understood by others, but not him. Garrett tried to play with the obvious misdirection, realizing that it didn't matter. Garrett simply needed to finish what someone had prided him in doing. He was growing tired of checking in with the person who had convinced him of their cause and had begun to question if he was working in the right direction months before. Garrett had finally determined that his employer probably wasn't the person who called the final shots. Growing tired of the sunbathing, Garrett casually walked toward Smith's, the popular coffee shop tucked between a clothing store for women curvier than he found flattering, and ironically a Pilates studio. He never made it inside. The door swung open with William heavily leaning toward 2 white cups in his hands, his hair a mangled mess. Let's go, he quickly said. Garrett noticed the blood coming from his nose and a few reddened scratches against his knuckles. What the hell happened? Here, William said, passing over the cup to Garrett as he rushed back to the car, looking over his shoulder. That's when Garrett noticed his eye. Will, what happened? I'll explain later. We just need to leave now. Garrett's thoughts began a bit of a marathon as he drove off, William leaning his head forward with a few brown napkins from the coffee shop pressed against his nose. Silence settled about him, one of his best qualities. Garrett stopped at a light and leaned into the steering wheel, vying for his friend's attention, who seemed distant. It's later, Will. Are you okay? What happened? Some guy was angry in the restroom. We had a disagreement. Did you know him? No, William quickly answered. You didn't know him and you just left him there? You just let a stranger do that to you and then you just left? He wasn't available to talk. He'll be fine. Garrett pressed on the accelerator as the light turned green. It was the man who had left someone on the cold bathroom floor that silenced William. He wondered who looked at him back in the mirror during those moments of contemplation. Chapter break. William slowly eased his hand into the ice filled to the lip of a plastic bowl. The cold felt good against his sore skin, better than he had anticipated. He wished he could numb more than his fist, tame the incessant throbbing of his thoughts as he scrambled to find an answer to give Patricia when she walked through the door. He should have gone some other time, but Garrett had insisted on his tagging along. Ironically, a man he thought he'd never encounter again found reason to indulge himself with a dry scone and a cup of coffee right when nature called. But had it been a random coincidence at all? How long had someone else been watching? He picked up a piece of ice from the bowl and crunched it between his molars, slowly crunching, as his thoughts raced about. Alan. With his knuckles the color of an heirloom tomato and his right eye like an eggplant, he figured to listen to his active psychic intuition going forward. His physical encounter with Alan, the sticky shadow of Albert, who for years claimed rulership over him, had William uneasy. It had been a surprisingly quiet year since he'd had his left lung as the subject of conversation, and a new scar added right in the middle of his chest. Too quiet. So quiet that William had to keep checking his pulse. What had Alan wanted? A move easterly to Arizona had been an easy decision for him. Convincing Patricia to continue making a journey with him had been another battle. She was so used to Southern California, had been for years. Uprooting and starting a new way of living with him and his daughter, Gwen, along with Alex and Lisa, had taken some major adjustments. What are you going to tell her? What was he going to tell her? Everything was fine. A lie. He had no clue what was happening. Probably worse than the lie. The house was still as he contemplated, so quiet it generated an unanticipated fear, one that he had forgotten as time passed without bringing attention. He had grown way too complacent. Alan. There was a whimper from Jake, the excitable mixed up tan dog pressed into a long body like a Dachshund. They had no clue what hodgepodge of canine Jake was. He was just an unwanted pup they found in a box marked free by the local grocery store. It felt like a family thing to do, bring an unwanted puppy home to a house with three kids he had never changed a diaper for. William reached down and pet Jake, who responded with a tender lick against his bruised hand. He smiled at the dog and the reality that his life was different. Welcome. Eric, a disenfranchised, broken participant in James Evans' cause, had a mid-sized mutt who cared about him enough to comfort his sore skin. There he suddenly sat in the kitchen of his three-bedroom, two-bath home in a family-oriented neighborhood in Arizona. A park at the corner, a vegetable garden, and a raised bed in the yard, with three bicycles carefully leaning against the wood fence he had helped the neighbor Jose to build on a Sunday afternoon. On the refrigerator posted center was a cork board and calendar Patricia had insisted on following. Her handwriting, with its delicate lifted edges highlighted in color, coordinated syncopation: blue for Alex, pink for Lisa, and yellow for Gwen. They were trying to create the idea of family. Alan was trying to change that life to what once was. A sudden mechanical hum of the garage door altered Jake as he sped up to greet his favorite person, Patricia, at the door. He chuckled a bit as he returned his hand to the ice. Gwen, get the ice cream in the freezer, please. Then you can grab the vacuum and start on the living room. Alex, Lisa, go get your laundry ready, just like I said in the car, Patricia directed as she made her way to the kitchen. Gwen walked in behind her, swinging a blue reusable shopping bag speckled in purple flowers onto the countertop. Did you find the shoes? William asked, keeping his face closer than was comfortable to the bowl. The cool of the ice radiated toward his chin. No, if it wasn't the right color, then they didn't have the right size. Pat started as she headed toward the cabinets. What's with the bowl, Will? William looked up just a bit to answer, only to find Gwen standing right next to him. The kid was beyond stealth at times. Oh my gosh, what happened to your eye? Gwen asked. What? Asked Patricia as she neared the table. What the hell happened? I'm fine. Patricia reached over and grabbed his hand from the ice water and observed his discolored skin. Then came the internalized compulsions she wanted no one to hear. Gwen, go get the vacuum. But Mom, now Gwen, they both echoed. Patricia slowly placed her left hand against her hip and planted herself in the middle of the kitchen. Alan. He had no idea what it meant. When Albert was killed in Nevada, his quest died with him. William had never learned of who Albert had been prying information for. That nameless face could have been anyone for Will. And Rochelle, Patricia and Christine's mother, had continued whatever secrets she carried. That is why he insisted on the move, having no ties to where they were over 18 months before. He knew that James Evans would never let up, however, not until he had made his biggest point. Alan could very easily have been part of that system. Buying time, a limited amount of it, William filled up a glass of water from the filter and laid it to the counter. Patricia remained unflinching like a subject in an oil painting. He hated when she did that to him. She knew he couldn't ignore her mental pull that drew him to her, that reminded him why she was the only woman who did what she did and why. I don't know what you want me to say, Pat. I don't know what to tell you. What happened? I went to get coffee. I left with 2 cups and a sore eye. Okay, fine. Who did it? Alan, a guy who worked with Albert. He asked me if I was ready right before forcing my face into a urinal. Alan was a tag-along, always had been. He had been more dependent on Albert than a wet toppling calf struggling to reach its mother's teat. There was no chance that an encounter, if it were intentional planning, would be something that he had planned or even wanted. Arizona had been without incident. For the first time, he had gotten used to typical routines like taking the kids to school and walking Jake, waving to a neighbor like he was a normal person and not a man who carried a deadly secret that was slowly killing him in his blood. Are you all right, Will? What if this was worse than White Ridge? What if circumstances that haunted him became reality from Alan's meeting? I don't know what any of this means. I had to say something only because it's not Halloween and you and Gwen saw my eye. What? Has this type of thing happened before and you didn't say anything? Random patients when he lived in Southern California, and an encounter in an alley, and a time he was approached with a gun and its owner at a train station. Arizona looked mighty nice. They had all been events leading to no traces for Pat to worry about. Maybe. It's under control. I'm fine. I'll make us fine. Suddenly, her angered face transitioned to a face of sorrow. Then came the tears. That madman had my children. He almost took you with him. I can't watch you die again, Will. The hum of the vacuum cleaner started in the background, overlapping the mental soundtrack of his popping flesh as a fragment of glass pressed his chest, a sound he'd never want to revisit. Then there's Gwen. What about Gwen? Something's wrong with her, Will, and she won't say anything to me. It's not. His face faded as he watched Patricia silently deflate even further. It'll be fine. I'll make this fine. They remained, saying nothing. Words. Words would only talk them into deeper concerns. They settled on a welcome silence instead. End of chapter. All right. My noisy neighborhood. We thank you so much for joining me today. And we do hope that our bugs and our cars going down the street would not be an interruption for next time that we read. But thanks again. If you would like to join me next week, again, I will be hosting another reading of the second book. We'll go into chapter 2. And I hope that you have something wonderful to drink. I was drinking a mimosa, like with some orange juice and champagne. But I think I can't drink it any longer because I probably had like a little bug, like a little fly drop into my drink. So I'll just keep that there. But I do hope that you're having a great glass of wine or coffee or something terrific. And have a great evening. And thank you so much for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye.